Welcome back to another episode of the Successful Driver Podcast here in the Clear Simple Used Truck Buying Studio here at Aero Truck Sales. Getting ready to talk to Jason Cannon, the editor of Commercial Carrier Journal. Jason, my man, appreciate you coming on.
Glad to do it. Glad to be anywhere, even if it is remotely.
Yeah. Well, we've got this set up here. We'll have to get you in sometime next time you're rolling through KC. Where are you stationed out of?
I'm about 2 hours south of Birmingham, Alabama. I'm about 50 miles inside the Mississippi state line.
Okay, so you're you probably frequent Tuscaloosa from time to time, huh?
Yeah, our office, our home office, the company headquarters is in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I've been there quite a few times. So, are you a Bama fan, or who do you follow?
I'm an Auburn fan. I'm a UAB graduate, so I have never learned to appreciate Alabama football. My wife's an Alabama graduate, so I just kind of have to live with it.
I was about to say that's got to be pretty tricky with Randall Riley and CCJ headquarters out there in Tuscaloosa. That's got to be a tricky line to draw there, huh?
You just have to bite your tongue a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, can I just get a little bit about your background here in the trucking industry? Just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to becoming the editor at CCJ.
Yeah, I'm a newspaper expat. My degree's in journalism. I worked in newspapers for about a decade. And I mean, you guys are pretty familiar with what's going on in the newspaper business. I kind of got out before it spit me out. I was lucky enough to land on my feet at Randall Riley doing some online editing for them. I did that for several years, and they asked me to take over a couple of roles at CCJ, which included the equipment and maintenance beat. I did all the articles, or most of the articles that were on maintenance and hard parts, tires, oil change intervals, things like that. I got my CDL. I do all of our test drives. I do almost all the test drives for Randall Riley properties, including all the ones that require a CDL. I've got a Class A CDL, so I can drive just about anything that is non-tank or hazardous that has 18 wheels and a steering wheel.
Wow. So you're normally just doing test driving. You don't, that's about all the miles you log in the year though, right?
Yeah, if it's been a while, I'm one of those guys that really likes to get out and practice, especially because if you're test driving the truck, a lot of times these are pre-production models. So if you ding it off of something, it's not something that's easily repaired. So I will get out and drive something I've driven before that's just really more practice to make sure I'm sharp. I can still back, that I can still kind of get a truck safely where it needs to go.
It's cool though that you with a journalism background that's been in the paper industry, someone actually, kind of, it's a little bit of practicing what you preach, being as immersive, in the trucking industry as you are to as the editor of CCJ, a guy that actually has a license. Like that's interesting to me because that's not the case across the board or with every sector.
Well, in a Class A truck, it's, you want to, when you do a test drive, when you tell a story, you want to tell a story that resonates with the guys that read it. And, it's not driving an F-150 where I'm just saying, the seat's comfortable. The ergonomics is good. My elbows kind of hang right. The power switches are right where they need to be. There's so much more involved in it when it's a Class A truck. There's considerations like noise. There's considerations like vibration. There's, on-road handling, power, if it's an 11 liter or a 13 liter or things like that. I mean, there's just so much more involved. And it feels a little disingenuous if you don't have a CDL, because then you're relegated to private property. And then how many truck drivers really spend a lot of time on property that's not shipping and receiving, right?
Right.
So, being able to get out on the highway and say, it feels like this on this stretch between Atlanta and Marietta, and it pulls on a 17% grade. I'm this many RPMs. This is what it feels like, loaded to this many thousands of pounds. That gives me an ability to tell a better and more rich story for the people that I'm trying to try to get the story across, because you're never going to fool those guys, man. I mean, if I'm driving this thing around the Walmart parking lot, they know it. And there's a big difference in, yanking 35,000 pounds over 600 miles than it is just dragging it around in a circle on a track.
Well, you seem like a storyteller at heart, obviously, and you kind of brought the word story up a few times. So you've probably, had some good exposure to some people in the trucking industry. So we like to ask this question to everybody that comes on this show. What do you think makes a successful driver?
Let's see. I think a lot of it comes down to your flexibility, because so much of your day is not within your control, right? I mean, you're going to spend time in traffic. You're going to spend time waiting to be loaded. You're going to be spending time waiting to be unloaded. Maybe your shipper missed an appointment. Maybe you missed an appointment. But you've just got to learn to fill that time, to fill that space with something that otherwise is productive. It's non-productive time that can be productive if you treat it right.
So, you've learned a lot about the trucking industry over your time. What's the most interesting thing that you think about, a truck driver and the people that are on the road every day? Like, what are the interesting things that you've kind of taken away, or perception changes that have occurred in your life as you've, kind of, immersed yourself in this culture?
I can answer that a couple of different ways. One, you just kind of come to understand that the trucking side of the house is about 10 years behind the automotive side with the deployment of technologies, especially some of the stuff that's put on the vehicle itself. Like adaptive cruise. Adaptive cruise is, depending on your OEM, is still 3 or 4 model years new. That's been on passenger cars forever. Some of these automated braking systems, they're still pretty cutting edge on the commercial trucking side, but they're basically standard on everything on the automotive side. And on the flip side of that is automated transmissions. You can't hardly find a standard in a passenger vehicle right now, or really anymore. But with a lot of drivers, a standard transmission or a manual transmission is the only vehicle that they'll drive. So, that's a complete different spin on things from the commercial side to the passenger vehicle side, or the light duty side.
Right now we're kind of experiencing a lot of supply chain issues, continued supply, chain issues. So, what do you kind of think in the short term, where what kind of impact do you think that's going to have on the trucking industry right now?
I think what you're going to see in the near term is kind of what you've been seeing in the I guess, most recent past. If you've got a truck on order, you're still not going to get it anytime soon. I mean, unless you're kind of one of those next couple guys in line. We did see some easement in parts availability in December. That was not anywhere near to the level of what's needed to kind of clear the truck backlog, so to speak. But it is getting slightly better. I'm still looking at order boards, and what I'm hearing is that the backlog is about a 14-ish month deep right now. So if you're at the end of the line, it's 2023 before you get your truck. I don't think you're going to see that kind of a logjam clear itself this year. I do think you'll see some relief, but if your OEM has told you that it's going to be late 2022 before you get your truck, it's probably going to be late 2022 before you get your truck.
You kind of touched a little bit on parts there. The outlook on parts, both for new trucks and just, secondary market truck, repairs. What's kind of your perspective there moving forward?
Is that a used truck question?
Used and new, honestly. I'm fascinated on both sides of it.
Used trucks right now, me and you both could probably retire if we'd have bought 4 or 5 used trucks in 2018 and just sat on them and not moved them. They're up 50, 60%, depending on what model year they are. I mean, and what class they are. I mean, there's, I think, Class 6. I read somewhere today that a Class 6 commercial conventional is up 103% over November 2020. So, I mean, you could have bought a truck for 40 grand, just parked it and sold it for 80. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And it's not quite that serious on the Class 8 side, but it's pretty daggone close. I think it's probably a 50, 60% increase right now as far as what the trucks are going for. Trucks are appreciating every month instead of depreciating. So you could have bought a truck last month, held it for a month, and probably sold it for at least 3% more money. That's better than what you get depending on what your 401k's in. You don't get a better return on your 401k than that. as far as parts availability goes, like I alluded to a minute ago, that is getting a little bit better depending on what you're looking for. There's a lot of sensors out there that are still in high demand. And we've seen a couple of truck OEMs that DEF sensors are in such desperate need that they have instituted a software patch that sort of tells the computer to ignore the fault from that the DEF sensor is given, so the thing will continue to work. That's not something that I think we would have imagined under normal circumstances. But I mean, we're 3 years into abnormal circumstances. So I think at some point you just got to kind of figure out a way to make it work to your advantage.
So if you were talking to someone looking to purchase a used vehicle right now, what would you be telling them to look for, to pay attention to? What are the things that you're focusing on right now if you're talking to someone considering purchasing a used commercial truck?
I think it goes back to what I answered your question about being a successful driver, flexibility. If you have a very unique and a very specific spec, the odds of you finding that truck are not in your favor. And if you're just married to it and that's exactly what you have to have, then you're going to have to pay up for it. That's going to be a premium truck commanding a premium price. It's going to sting when you go to get it. If you've got some flexibility to where maybe engine displacement is not critical, it's important, but it's not critical. If your axle ratios, there's some flexibility there. If you're not married to one OEM, obviously everybody has a preference, but if you've got some flexibility on whether you will switch OEMs, all of that stuff's going to work into your favor. You can get trucks. You may not be able to get the one you want, or you may not be able to afford the one you want. But if you have some flexibility and you're able to kind of take a beating on one end, and when I say take a beating, it's maybe you don't get a comfort feature, maybe you don't get the rear axle ratio that you want, maybe you don't get the transmission that you want. But if you have some of that flexibility, that's going to be your ally right now.
So how do you think COVID is going to affect drivers in 2022? Obviously, we've seen a lot of changes in the trucking industry the last few years. For this upcoming year that we're about, that we're just in the, in the beginning of, how do you think it's going to affect drivers in 2022?
I don't think 2022 is going to look a lot different than 2021, really. It all comes down to drivers are still looking for the same things that they've always looked for. If you get lots of respect, they want to go home. They want fair pay. They want clear communication. I don't think the pandemic changed any of that. And I don't think anything changes any of that. And you think about the way you like to be treated at your job and the way I like to be treated at mine. I mean, that all filters down to the truck driver. It's a unique job, but it's really, it's a very human type job. A lot of touch points for the truck driver. I mean, they have to deal with dispatch. They have to deal with the fleet manager. They have to deal with the maintenance manager. They have to deal with the people on the customer side. They touch and deal with a lot of people. So, I don't think their wants and goals have changed throughout the course of 2019, 2020, 21. I can't see it changing in 2022.
Do you just think the trucking industry has changed forever out of the pandemic? Do you think there are just some fundamental changes that are just going to just be part of this, this profession, this industry moving forward?
Oh, sure. I mean, everything's changed forever. But specific to trucking, I think a lot of the transitions that have sort of been forced here make a lot of sense, and it'll enable a lot of efficiencies on down the road once everybody's kind of come to embrace them. We have seen a shift toward paperless, electronic bills of lading. That's not super common right now, but they do pick up a little bit more head of it. The longer the pandemic drags on, the more head of steam that they get. And I can't imagine why that won't become an industry standard, because it expedites a very mundane process. I mean, There's no reason for me to get out of my vehicle, come find you so you could look at a piece of paper, so you could sign a piece of paper, so you could give it back to me so I could climb back in the truck, when I should be able to hand all of this stuff off to you electronically well before I ever get there. You can deal with it well before I ever get there, confirm that everything's accurate on site, and send me on my way. I mean, that just unlocks a lot of time on the driver's side, but it also unlocks a lot of time on the warehousing side, because that doesn't happen once a day, right? It happens 500 times a day, depending on how many people are coming in and off site.
Well, that was Jason Cannon. He's the editor of CCJ. I'm so appreciative of your time. You get some great questions. It was great to talk to you, Jason. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us here.
Glad to do it, man. Anytime. That was as painless as it could be.
We try. That's an episode of the Successful Driver Podcast. Appreciate you listening, watching. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube if you haven't already, and we'll catch you later.